Should I get a developmental editor is one of the most common questions I get from new fiction writers. As one of the most expensive edits you can buy, a developmental edit is about structuring your story so that it has the biggest impact. In this video, I'm going to explore what developmental editing is, what to expect, and how to determine if you need one in the first place. What's up, guys? My name is Michael Aron with Author Level Up, helping you write world-class stories better and faster. I began my career in 2012 after a near-death experience, and 40-plus books later, I'm still writing like crazy and helping authors do the same. I create these videos because I believe that each of you has Stephen King level of talent, and you just need help unlocking it. If you're new here, consider subscribing and click that little bell to get helpful writing videos every week. And in this writing video, we're demystifying developmental editing. Now, before we begin, I need to disclaim that every writer's career is different and we all have different paths in life. Despite what I say in this video, you have to make the best decisions for your career. But in general, I'm reluctant to recommend developmental editing except in a handful of situations. I just wanted to throw that out there so that you guys know where I'm coming from. If you were expecting me to tell you that you need a developmental editor and why, well, you probably should find another video. Developmental editing is known by many different names. Structural editing, substantive editing, content editing, or the most common these days, book doctoring or market analysis edits. Developmental editing is the beginning of the editing process. You've just finished your book, but you want someone to comment on the story, test it, break it down, see if it really works. A developmental editor will do this for you, analyzing your story at a high level to look at your plot, character development, and pacing to determine if your story, 1, makes sense on a logical level, and 2, is engaging for readers based on commonly accepted writing best practices. Now, this makes a great deal of sense in theory. The next levels of editors, copy editors, and proofreaders generally don't look at your manuscript for major holes or character development. And you may or may not have access to beta readers who can do this for you, and at the level that a developmental editor would. Also, in theory, an editor should have a good idea of story structure and what works and what doesn't by virtue of the sheer amount of books that they edit on a regular basis. But for reasons I'll explain in a minute, the theory doesn't always equal practice. So what does a developmental edit include? Let's start by talking about what a developmental edit does not include. In general, it doesn't include line edits or proofreading. Since most developmental edits require rewriting, it would be pointless for the editor to point out style errors or typos. They're also not going to help you with commas, paragraph pacing, or low-level inconsistent details. Remember, they're focusing on your story at the macro level. I researched a dozen or so working developmental editors, and here is a list of the common elements that they include in their services. A comprehensive story report, market analysis of how the editor thinks your book will do in the market, a synopsis or query critique, coaching calls, and last but not least, edits for your story, usually done with track changes in Microsoft Word. Since developmental editing is quite involved and takes a lot of the editor's time, it's expensive, and the process often takes several months to get on the editor's client list, and several months for the editor to work on your manuscript. So those are the basics of developmental editing so that we're all speaking the same language here. You're probably thinking, why don't I recommend developmental editing? On this channel, my goal is to help writers write better and faster. I have one core belief, that confidence is the cornerstone of any writer's career. I talk over and over and over on this channel about how writers need more confidence. I've taught you guys how to build that confidence and sustain it even in hard times. This is because lack of confidence, more than anything, is the #1 killer of writing careers. It leads to bad decisions, which then leads to a downward spiral that never ends well. If you have confidence, no one can take it away from you. They can belittle you or your books, but not your dignity. Too many writers can't separate themselves from their books and therefore can't pick up the pieces when a book launch shatters them or when readers dislike their work. Developmental editing, for all its pros and benefits, directly undermines a writer's confidence. Think about it. We all know how hard writing a book is. For some writers, sending their book to an editor and receiving a mountain of edits and rewrites is enough to destroy any confidence they have left. My question is this: Why do you feel like you need someone to break your story down and put it back together again? When I ask people this, the answer is usually one of two things. First, it's because they view developmental edits as helpful to their personal development as a writer, usually because it's their first book, and second, because they want to make the book better. Let's talk about this for a minute. There's a theory about why people buy products. They don't always buy because the product solves a need. If that was the case, then every entrepreneur in history would be rich. They buy because of an emotional connection. They feel something about the product that stirs them to buy without even realizing it. For example, when you buy life insurance, you're not buying money, which is what life insurance really is. You're buying peace of mind. When you buy an online course, you're buying exclusive access and convenience. More often than not, the content that you're buying from that instructor is freely available online. So when you think about developmental edits, you're not really buying a better story. First and foremost, you're buying an editor's time, since you're paying them top dollar to work on your manuscript instead of someone else's copy edit or proofread, for example. But most importantly, you're buying confidence, and that's one of the worst things that you can buy because it doesn't last very long. And let me go on a tangent for a minute and highlight that there are so-called writing coaches out there that charge writers money for coaching calls. Writers pay these coaches money to check in with them on a monthly or quarterly basis to help them finish their book. I consider myself to be an extremely open-minded person, and I try to take in all sides of an issue, but there is no situation where I would ever recommend that you pay someone just for them to give you a phone call and a few words of encouragement. It's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard, honestly. Don't pay for confidence. This tangent's over now. But some people might say, but the story would be better after developmental editing. Really? How do you know that? Who's to say that your story isn't worse after developmental edit? You don't know. Fiction is mysterious. Writers think they know what readers want, and readers prove us wrong again and again. Even if you write a book that hits all the major tropes and has the same story structure as all the other bestsellers, doesn't mean that it's going to sell. Especially if it's your first book. Especially if it's your first book. And I have a newsflash for you. Editors don't really understand the fiction market any more than writers do. Honestly, they just have a different perspective. So I'm going to ask you guys, help me understand this. You're going to pay an editor top dollar to deconstruct your story and give you confidence that the story is good, yet you have no objective way of understanding whether the editor's recommended edits will actually make your story better and help you sell more books. To me, this does not help with the emotional roller coaster that I talk about all the time on this channel. It perpetuates it. And it gets worse. In general, you can expect to pay anywhere from 7 cents to 9 cents a word for a developmental edit. For a 50,000 word manuscript at 7 cents a word, that's $3,500. For an 80,000 word manuscript, that's $7,200. I don't know what kind of money you guys are making in your full-time jobs, but I can guarantee you that most of you don't have a few $1,000s just laying around. Compound that with the fact that most books, first books, don't do very well, and you have a recipe for not ever making your money back. You could just as easily burn the money you spend on a developmental editor and you might get the same sales results. Let's live in a perfect world for a moment. Let's assume that for your first book it would cost you $3,500 for a developmental edit, $500 for a copy edit, $250 for a proofread, and $500 for a book cover. That's $4,750 for one book. If you have a series of 3 books, that's $14,250. Look at that math. For the cost of one developmental edit, you could write 3 books. Instead of paying thousands of dollars for something that may or may not work, you can learn better and faster by writing more books and getting them in front of readers. If those books don't do well, then you just saved yourself several $1,000s. If they do well, you'll recoup your costs much quicker. This isn't all about the money, but I know that too many of you guys are working to make ends meet, and you've got spouses and children and debt. Throwing that kind of money at a book is irresponsible in my opinion. The last thing you want to do is create tension at home because of the money that you're spending on your dream. And you can't follow your dream in the first place if you run out of money. At least with copy editing and proofreading, you have somewhat of an objective standard. You can gauge the quality of an edit by how many typos and grammatical errors are left when you're done. You can also get a sense of how your copy edit and proofreading are by reading your reviews. If readers don't call out issues with the editing, then it was at least good enough. I could stop here, but I won't. Despite my views on developmental editing, there are a lot of good editors out there who are just trying to help authors, and my intent is not to diminish them or their services in any way with this video, honestly. However, there are a lot of unscrupulous people out there who use developmental editing and book doctoring as a way to part authors from their hard-earned money. If you're going to get scammed at any point during the editing phase, chances are it will be during developmental editing. These unscrupulous editors often charge astronomical rates and offer little in return, if anything. They know that writers are willing to sacrifice anything for their dreams and that they'll spend money irrationally to do it. These scammers tend to prey on the young, the old, and the stupid. Oh, and writers who lack confidence too. Guys, the funny thing about confidence is that when you have it, scammers also tend to stay away. Now, spotting a scammy editor is beyond the scope of this video, but I bring it up because you guys need to be on alert. In general, don't call an 800 number for a consultation, don't hire an editor who you can't vet, and don't risk your savings, credit, and livelihood for a developmental edit. For a good resource on how to spot suspicious editors, I highly recommend checking out the Alliance of Independent Authors, ALLI for short. ALLI thoroughly vets editors and other publishing professionals, calls out suspicious business practices, and maintains a database of trusted vendors that you can hire with confidence. As an advisor for ALLI, I can't recommend this enough if you still choose to engage in a developmental edit. Honestly, it's just a good service all around if you want to hire anyone for your publishing business. An affiliate link is in the video description, so join us and be a member today. And there's also Writer Beware, a blog run by Victoria Strauss. That's a good one too. And Readsy, another service that thoroughly vets editors and other publishing professionals. Am I saying that developmental edits are scams? No, but I am saying that you should be careful and that anytime you're spending this kind of money, you run the risk of running into crooks, so beware. If you've come this far and still think you need a developmental edit, here's my suggestion. You can do this at a fraction of the cost and still get substantially the same result. I call it the poor man's developmental edit. Find a forum where readers of your genre hang out. Let's say, for simplicity's sake, that you write epic fantasy. Post on the forum with your book and that you're looking for a paid beta reader. Offer, I don't know, 100 to 200 bucks, maybe more depending on your book length. Half up front and the other half at the end. Execute a really brief contract to make sure they're legit, and then use their comments as your developmental edit. Now, some people may quibble with this because it's not a true developmental edit, but it accomplishes what you were looking for, an initial impression of the story, what worked and what didn't. I would much rather take this advice from an avid reader of the genre than an editor, unless the editor had a proven track record in editing books in that genre that became bestsellers. And that's rare. You can spend a couple of hundred where you would have spent a couple of thousand, and you get the second pair of eyes you were looking for, and you help that reader by supporting them and putting some money in their pocket to support their family and buy more books. Anyway, I hope you guys understand where I'm coming from now and why I do not recommend developmental editing. Be confident in your stories and in your own career. That's it for this video. If this is your first time watching, I would love to have you subscribe. Every week I publish videos just like this one with writing advice to help you write better and grow your influence with readers. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.